the fact that there were 200 to 300 prisoners taken by Washington, to me, is extremely decisive, because the folks who take the prisoners are the folks who win.
They identified Princeton as a Priority 1 battlefield, or Class B Priority 1, which has high, short, and long-term medium threats, which battlefields are remarkably resilient places. If you don't mess with them, if you don't strip the topsoil off of them and pile it someplace, the battle is still going to be there, the ground. Recognizing that a battle is a pretty short piece of time over a long time in history, is there anything that's still going to be sitting out there as part of that battlefield?
Primary sources, as Kip was saying, in the 19th century, they had a tendency to make things up. Not that that has ended completely, but there's one reason why we have a road, and that's because it leads to somewhere. If a road's no longer used, it doesn't lead anywhere, it disappears, which it has today, right? And the other is roads go along property lines. Nobody has a road clear across his cornfield. It goes along property lines. So
the battle was fought so that you have British forces who would have been moving on US 206 or the post road, and then deploying and moving across this direction to engage an American army that was also coming from this direction. And Bob will talk a little bit more about that.
As you know, Washington was eager to get out of Princeton with his army, about 5,500. For some of the few of them had died in the battle. That Cornwallis was marching at a fast pace up from Trenton with 8,000 professional British soldiers. He wanted to get out of town quickly. So there wasn't a lot of time for burial. And so the idea of a mass grave makes a lot of sense.
When we did some geophysics on the parcel.
It is in a quarry, and supposedly contains British and American soldiers, 21 British and 15 American continental soldiers.
Then any pension applications in the Battle of Princeton that talk about burials, and the answer for that is they didn't stay long enough to bury the dead. They were out of there within hours. They didn't want to wait, and the British didn't either. Who buries the dead most likely are the locals, and this is why either the damage claims or if there are Quaker records or something, they will give us indication of where they're buried, how many there are, etc. Up in Bennington, for example, or Hubbardton, where the militia is there for 2 or 3 weeks, they're all locals anyway. Well, we have a clear, nice distinction for Continental Army soldiers or other militia. They actually make coffins when they bury them. The Brunswickers are dragged by horses into a pit and just covered up. There we have detailed descriptions. We just don't have them from here. This is why looking at civilian records would be so important if you want to find out.
Burying them in the entrenchment trenches where the British had set up entrenchments to defend the fort, or defend Princeton. They're putting the bodies in those trenches, and then at some point later, because it's cold, you can't do anything with them, they're just sticking them in the trenches, then they're burying them later on. Is that part of the burials that are coming from the battlefield?
To a halt. As a result, Cornwallis, with British troops, marches onto Trenton, or maybe better fights his way down to Trenton. There's Maidenhead, etc. There's a number of battles, small events until Cornwallis eventually gets there. And on the evening of the 2nd of January 1777, Cornwallis is confident that the next day he will bag the fox. The problem is, of course, that the fox disappears in the night of the 2nd to the 3rd of January over maybe 2 to 2.5 hours. I mean, it's not as if you I don't know how many of you were in the military, but you have 5,000 to 6,000 people. Just to line them up on a road, you got 2 miles of people lined up. This is a relatively slow process of people marching. Went around in Vermont, what is today Vermont, and New Hampshire, and that whole area, also New York, for oral history interviews. And I looked at some of those in the context of these other projects, and lo and behold, they will say we were at Princeton, and they will talk about this. Now, I would never have gone to Bennington or Bar in Vermont to do research for Battle of Princeton, for one thing, Wade wouldn't have paid my trip. If every one of them only fires 3 rounds or 4 rounds, how many musket balls are out there? And then the Continental Army fires 2, right? 3 or 4 rounds, whoever's down there, and suddenly you are in 10,000 or more musket balls that have been fired out there. Sure, some of them being picked up. And
so the fact that the Breezy parcel has been acquired by the state and is now going to be preserved is actually really exciting.